One of the biggest myths preventing mass outrage is that the blight of poverty we're seeing is either invisible to the more affluent communities or that it can be dismissed as self-inflicted. The myth is that these areas have become lazy and turned to drugs, and this has made their regions poor. The truth is the opposite. Jobs in these areas went overseas. Of course, the weakest were the canary in the coal mine. The black neighborhoods went first in the 80s.
In the early 1990s, urban black communities were suffering from economic collapse. A literal depression was affecting those communities. The unemployment rate had quadrupled in many urban areas. Neighborhoods that were solidly working class, were suddenly turning into ghettos practically overnight.
Then the poor southern states, then the Rust Belt. Now most of the country, aside from the banking sectors and lobbyist sectors of the East Coast and the tech and entertainment sectors of the West Coast, and a few states that lowered their corporate taxes to steal businesses from other states, are the places where you can find jobs. But even in these areas, homelessness is rampant. There aren't the kind of jobs that create a society. There are only a handful of specialized jobs, which leads to another myth. The truth is that the loss of local economies causes the drug usage, not the other way around. The Republicans that infiltrated and took over the once working-class Democratic Party pushed this false ideology. The idea was that we could send all of our blue-collar jobs overseas and retrain all our workers to become white-collar workers.
It was one of the highlights of President Clinton's first term, passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, also known as NAFTA. Critics blame NAFTA for the loss of manufacturing jobs in industrial states including Ohio and Pennsylvania. Hillary Clinton helped get NAFTA approved. She held at least 5 meetings to strategize about how to win congressional approval. She helped the White House block opposition from labor and environmental groups, and she was the featured speaker at a crucial meeting. Participants in that event said, quote, "Her remarks were totally pro-NAFTA. There was no equivocation for her support for NAFTA at the time."
Oh, I think that everybody is in favor of free and fair trade, and I think that NAFTA is proving its worth.
I think on balance, NAFTA has been good for New York and America.
With this Trans-Pacific Partnership, we are writing the rules for the global economy. America is leading in the 21st century. Our workers will be the ones who get ahead.
But for those folks who've lost their job right now because a plant went down to Mexico, that isn't going to make you feel better. And so what we have to do is to make sure that folks are trained for the jobs that are coming in now, because some of those jobs of the past are just not going to come back.
Of course, the Republicans were initially for these. They were the first to get bought out by the super-rich oligarchy class. It allowed them to have cheap slave labor abroad, increasing their profits, and broke up their greatest foe, the workers' unions, who once supported the Democratic Party. It gave more profit to the Republican donors and hurt the donors of their rivals, the old labor Democrats. The Republican and Democrats' Clintons believed not only in shaping the society, but that it was a foregone conclusion.
It is true that the Glass-Steagall law is no longer appropriate to the economy in which we lived. It worked pretty well for the industrial economy, which was highly organized, much more centralized, and much more nationalized than the one in which we operate today.
They, along with Obama and most of the Republican Democrats, had to sell this to the Democratic constituency. To do this, they sold a blue-collar, free society. We would need to be retrained, yet the cost of the initial training has increased over 1,000%, making it difficult for new workers to earn a living wage while paying back what used to be home-sized loans, and making it nearly impossible for families with older parents to retrain. Basically, they're saying, go learn to do something else, but they're not helping the people to do that. They're actually making it harder through the high cost of training. Not to mention, some small factory town in middle America probably won't have a new tech business springing up in the ashes of a factory closing, forcing the unemployed to foot the cost of relocation that they don't have due to their only equity being in a house that they can't sell in their now ghost hometown. Also, if you're planning a sea change in your economy, be logical to start programs of retraining before moving the jobs so there wouldn't be mass destruction of communities. The fact that none of this was done and nothing is being done to offset this change means that politicians and their oligarch masters were willing to sacrifice millions of lives in the names of profit. Millennials are the best educated and lowest paid generation. 60% of those graduating don't even work in the field they trained for. Roughly 1/3 live with their parents after graduating, not being able to find work or be able to pay their loans and housing costs. Constantly moving industrial sectors is a never-ending trend. When one poor country receives an industrial influx, it has an American future to look forward to. Eventually another country will become cheaper, industry will exodus there for greener pastures. The only beneficiaries of this are the owner class and Wall Street. The rest live in a wake of destruction. A largely sociopathic society that has little empathy and only ambition will ignore the blight they are causing others, even though eventually they reap the karma as the same cycle happens to them. Instead of us all putting our feet down, we accept it, thinking we'll prosper at someone else's expense, and it will never come back to us. It's kind of like starting a relationship with someone cheating on their spouse without the forethought of thinking they'll cheat on you eventually as well. What no one talks about, though, is that by moving factories overseas, you're not just sending blue-collar jobs, but white as well. A factory doesn't just have one boss and a bunch of hand workers. There are managers, supervisors, programmers for the machines, and IT for the offices.
Hello, IT. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Have you tried sticking it up your arse?
There are salespeople, buyers, secretaries, human resource departments for hiring, trainers, marketing, accountant, estimators, quality control, and other jobs that also leave when a factory goes. Then there are janitors and cleaning staff, groundskeeper as well. The local signs company go bust when all the factories leave. The snowplow businesses go bust when there are only empty parking lots in town. When all these jobs leave, all the other local businesses, from gas stations to grocery stores to auto mechanics, all close down when these jobs leave. 45-year-olds with families can't go back to school to train to be software engineers, and there aren't enough software engineer jobs for 370 million people anyway.
You have a lot of experience with computers.
I did say that on my CV, yes. Emails, sending emails, receiving emails, deleting emails, the web, using mouse, mices, using mice, clicking, double-clicking, the computer screen, of course, the keyboard, the bit that goes on the floor down there.
The hard drive?
Correct.
Well, you certainly seem to know your stuff.
Besides, all people are different. You've probably heard people say that some are book smart or not book smart. Some say they're mechanically inclined or not mechanically inclined. You have people that are good at math, others that aren't.
The 9 types of intelligence. What your talents reveal about you. As it turns out, being good at math or languages aren't the only way to be considered intelligent. Everyone is gifted in their own way.
Therefore, in a like manner, the geometric metaphors can derive a repeated vectoral sum. This was your assignment, and I would like to see the results. Please, take them out.
Oops.
Intelligence is broken down into 9 different types, and this categorization was first theorized by developmental psychologist Howard Gardner in 1983. What other scientists thought were soft skills such as interpersonal skills, Gardner realized they were actually different types of intelligence. We all have strengths and weaknesses in different areas. Number 1, naturalistic intelligence. With naturalistic intelligence, you have a great sensitivity to the natural world. You may also be able to connect with animals very easily, or you may very well be known as someone with a green thumb. Number 2, musical intelligence. Number 3, logical mathematical intelligence. This type of intelligence equips you with the ability to calculate and carry out mathematical operations as well as mull over hypotheses and propositions.
Well, as you know, there is considerable interest in the atomic iodine laser for fusion. This is molecular iodine. Therefore, this laser doesn't suffer from the problem of recombination of the atomic iodine.
You must be very proud.
Proud?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Dr. Hathaway, I saw your show the other night on radioactive isotopes, and I've got a question for you.
Yes?
Is that your real hair?
Yeah. I tell you, is Mitch by any chance adopted?
Why, no.
It's amazing.
Isn't it?
Number 4. Existential intelligence. While most people go about their daily lives without devoting much thought to their existence, with your existential intelligence you tend to mull over deep thoughts. These thoughts may include the whys and hows of life and death. It has also been called spiritual or moral intelligence. Life-smart people with high existential intelligence are deeply philosophical. Number 5. Interpersonal intelligence. With interpersonal intelligence, you have the seemingly unique ability to get along superbly well with others. You interact with others in such a way that you're able to understand and communicate well. Interpersonal intelligence makes it possible for you to effectively communicate through verbal and nonverbal means, to distinguish among others, to sense the temperament and moods of people, and to consider various points of views. People-smart individuals are usually found among politicians, social workers, actors, and teachers. Number 6. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence. While clumsy people have the tendency to be awkward in all things physical,
No!
you possess the capacity to stay graceful and coordinated when using a range of physical skills, as well as manipulating objects. You have an almost perfect sense of timing, and your mind-body coordination is nearly flawless. Body-smart people usually become craftspeople, dancers, surgeons, athletes, or pursue other careers that similarly involve exceptional mind-body union. Number 7. Linguistic intelligence. With linguistic intelligence, you have the capacity to think in words and use these to make yourself understood. This type of word-smart intelligence allows you to appoint complex meanings and express these through the use of language. Though this human competence is widely used, it is most evident in the way effective public speakers, novelists, journalists, and poets make use of their metalinguistic skills. Number 8. Interpersonal intelligence. With interpersonal intelligence, you have the remarkable ability to understand yourself, your thoughts, and your emotions, and you are capable of using this knowledge to plan your life. While interpersonal intelligence does involve self-appreciation, it also comprises a wider understanding of the human condition. Examples of self-smart people include philosophers, spiritual leaders, writers, and psychologists. Number 9. Spatial intelligence. With spatial intelligence, you have the capacity to consider things in 3 dimensions. This type of intelligence involves a dynamic imagination, image manipulation, mental imagery, artistic and graphic skills, and spatial reasoning. People with spatial intelligence are highly creative, and this type of intelligence is demonstrated mainly by picture-smart people, such as architects, sculptors, painters, pilots, and sailors. There you have it, the 9 domains of intelligence according to Howard Gardner.
Really get disgusted when they call it the Rust Belt. We digress for a minute. If you're an operator in a steel mill in what they call the pulpit, where the computers are working, you have more training to get into that pulpit than you do to fly a 747 plane. This is not Rust Belt. The buildings are made of steel, but that is a sophisticated operation. If you see a roll of steel in a yard, Every roll of steel in the yard has been scientifically designed, chemically designed to meet a specific tolerance. You can put the raw material in the one end of the mill, it'll come out at the other end rolled within 1/10,000th of an inch of deviance. That's not Rust Belt. That's sophisticated scientific making of steel.
There needs to be a balance in nature. When this balance is lost, eventually it affects all of nature. It's the same with society, and both parties are pushing full speed ahead at destroying this balance. When America had a strong manufacturing base, it also had a strong middle class. Even though the middle class is shrinking in most countries, those with strong manufacturing, like Japan, Germany, and China, top lists of the per capita economies, with exception to oil-rich countries and countries like America, where a highly leveraged financial sector takes up nearly 30% of the economy, and where the majority of the economy goes to 1% of the population. Even if you resolve yourself to thinking that blue-collar jobs aren't coming back, some jobs can't be outsourced, like America's need for infrastructure, of failing roads and bridges, to comparably inferior broadband systems and high-speed rail. Yet where are the politicians on this? Only a handful dare to bring it up and are overshadowed by their fellow politicians. The world's always changing.
In my days, we didn't have Kleenex. When you turned 17, you were given the family handkerchief. It hadn't been washed in generations, and it stood on its own, filled with diseases and swarming with flies. If you tried to blow your nose, you'd get an infection, and your head would swell up and turn green, and children would burst into tears at the sight of you, and that's the way it was, and we liked it.
When the record player came out, people feared the loss of live music attendance. Horse supplies waned when mankind switched to the combustion engine. These things are inevitable. But when education was affordable and the media kept us informed of the state of society, people knew to be ready for change and had the ability to retrain. Countries today like Denmark have free education and 4 years of unemployment with nearly no loss of previous income, allowing one to go back to school regardless of age or family considerations. This lack of interruption in income keeps the mortgages paid, the local businesses from collapsing into depressed neighborhoods. We can be flexible with our economies, but this requires social planning, programs that the free market does not provide. Near singular economies without massive devastation is magical thinking and a utopian ideal that only works in the imagination.